Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and we're continuing with our Tomb Kings faction focus, where we're looking at 8th edition army rules for Warhammer Fantasy Battle to see how they influence Warhammer The Old World in the round, looking at a role and a flavour of a unit or character, and with the expectation that it would have a similar role and flavour in the Old World despite having different rules. Now, we've covered all the main parts of the army book, and what's left are those legendary lords and heroes. Now, we know the timeline is different from the original Warhammer Fantasy Battle. It's actually set further back in time. Now, the interesting thing with the Tomb Kings, as opposed to a lot of factions, either the characters are dead or they aren't born yet. With the Tomb Kings, this is an ancient civilization of which the characters were all active, having been awoken in Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So all the characters in here do exist. The question will be is, will they appear in Warhammer The Old World? I think there's a chance that at least some of them might. They definitely were around. The question you might have is that the reason they might not be there because they haven't been awoken yet from the tomb for whatever reason. They might be in a period of slumber, haven't been awoken and gone back to the casket. So, but I say, of all the factions, it's quite possible that there's a number here that could be included. Now, as with all of these faction focuses I am going to include the legendary lords for interest purposes and the sake of completeness, with the expectation that most of the named characters that were in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, most if not all, probably won't return, but we are going to do it for completeness. So without further ado, let's look at the first legendary lord. Now, that first legendary lord is the one and only Settra the Imperishable, the great king of Nehekhara, probably the most famous, or definitely the most famous Tomb King of them all. So much so, even he did get a mention in one of the Age of Sigmar books around the Stormcast, or it was certainly implied. And yeah, very, very well known and a big part of Warhammer lore. So who is he, though? He's king of all Tomb Kings and the most powerful, so much so that he never needs to return to his casket to rest, unlike the other Tomb Kings. He rides on a magical chariot wearing the crown of Nehekhara, and you can see that chariot on the right-hand side. Unfortunately, I really don't think the model does him justice. Essentially, it's a 4-horse skeleton chariot with a Tomb King riding it. I think that if Settra ever did reappear, he needs a much better model to make him stand out. Overall, though, he was a very bloodthirsty and very skilled warrior, and was also the only Tomb King that knows the secrets of the Leash Priests and understands their language. But to his frustration, he could never master their magical arts. How does this man look on the tabletop, however? Well, Settra, high weapon skill, toughness, attacks and leadership, low ballistic skill and initiative. Ballistic skill, not a problem. He only does come with light armour, however, this is not a problem. Right, the best Blade of Petra is his magic weapon. It's got flaming attacks, no armour save, and unsaved wounds cause -1 to hit for the rest of the game. That's -1 to hit, not -1 weapon skill. That's pretty big. If you take 2 wounds, that's -2 to hit for the rest of the game. He has Chariot of the Gods. It's an enchanted item. That's his chariot with 4 skeletal steeds, and impact hits are magical flaming attacks. So if you're ethereal, no escape. The Crown of Nehekhara is an enchanted item. It gives My Will Be Done to all units within 6 inches. This is big. It means you can put him in a unit, and if he's on his chariot, he can be in a unit of chariots, but give that bonus to the other units around him. He also has the Scarab Brooch of Osirian. That's a talisman. It's a 4+ ward save with a 3+ ward save against spells. So the light armor not being an issue. 4+ ward save, 3+ ward save against spells. Chariot-wise, he's multi-armed Chariot of the Gods, that's a 4+ armor save. And he's a level 1 wizard using Nehekaran magic spells. So, Cetra, he's got no special rules outside that of a normal Tomb King, except Cetra the Great, where it means he must be the army general. Like, he's a good and durable melee character that can join a unit of chariots, but he's double the points cost of a lord on a chariot, or a Tomb King on a chariot. And he takes half of the available points for lords and heroes. So, you know, that you were limited on the number of points you could take, and he takes half of that. So he could rarely be justified. With most Tomb King's armies, it was often much better to go with lots of cheaper heroes and lords than it is to put it all into one, just because the army needs the buffs across all of its units, and Cetra alone couldn't make up for that. He may have had value if you were taking a very heavy chariot focused army. Maybe you were taking a unit of like 9 or more chariots, but certainly not an optimal choice. Plus the model was old and didn't really fit the status of the character, so it wasn't that popular. So overall, not taken, and it remains to be seen. I'm not going to comment too much on from an old world perspective, but if the Cetra did appear, you can expect him on a cool chariot, and you can expect him to be a beast in combat, because that's what he's all about. Next up is High Queen Khalida, beloved of Asaph, a really cool looking model, as you can see there on foot with that snake themed staff. So who was she? Well, she was the warrior queen of Libaras with legendary qualities of intelligence, bravery, honour and justice. Khalida, however, was killed by her cousin Neferata, Queen of Lamia, another ultra-famous character in Warhammer lore. And for those that know, she was killed in ritual combat with Neferata because she had a suspicion that Neferata had become the first of vampires drinking the elixir of life from Nagash. Her suspicion was actually true, though it wasn't proven. And she, despite her being an excellent warrior, Neferata with those supernatural powers was always going to be too much for Khalida. As Neferata was killing Khalida, she tried to make her a vampire by giving her the blood kiss. However, Khalida calls out to the gods, and Asaph, the asp goddess, answers and purifies that vampiric taint. However, Khalida did still die and was then mummified. Now, in times of need, Khalida awakens and is infused with the power of Asaph. Known for her famed archer legions, Khalida defends her lands with venom instead of blood, which allows her to move at the speed of a serpent. However, she does maintain that terrible hatred for Nagash and all vampires. So how does she play? Well, high movement for a lord on foot. Weapon skill, toughness, attacks, initiative, and leadership, all good, but with low ballistic skill. Low strength and wounds for a lord. She only does have light armor, and she does have the venom staff. Now, this is an arcane item with a bound spell, which is a magic missile that goes 24 inches, 2d6 strength for hits. So what does she come in terms of special rules? Well, she gets the basic Tomb King ones, but she also comes with poisoned attacks. So auto wounds on 6s to hit, always strikes first, which also means not only does she strike first, but if her initiative is higher than that of the enemy, she re-rolls all hits. She gets the Blessing of Asaph, which she gives to her whole unit. So her unit becomes Ballistic Skill 3 with poisoned attacks. And she's got the Incarnation of the Asp Goddess, which means poisoned attacks don't have any effect on her. Given she's got venom for blood, that's not a surprise. Rarely taken character due to a bit of a role mismatch. Her bonuses really are to a unit of archers. Give the Ballistic Skill 3, give them poisoned attacks, and she's got the ranged spell. But she's also a reasonably decent melee character. She's very high in points. and also needs to be in the combat to try and make some of those points back, which is exactly where archers don't want to be. And how often is she going to be targeted by poison? Very rarely, so that ability is situational. So quite high with a bit of a role mismatch. They wanting to be with archers, but needing to also be at the front to be of benefit. And that did cause a problem. And these hybrid characters that need to do kind of both things often aren't good at one particular thing. Next up is Arcan the Black. So these characters well known. Arcan even still going today in Age of Sigmar as a Mortarch of Nagash. So Arcan the Black, the Leash King. So there is obviously a model today of him as a Mortarch. However, this is the original model of Arcan. You can see on the right hand side there, you can see the age of it with its goblin green base, but that was his winged chariot. So who is Arcan though? Well, he's the first and most loyal of Nagash's followers, and it was Arcan who actually led the coup that brought Nagash to power. Arcan was the first to take the elixir of life after Nagash, and was the most skilled of Nagash's pupils in the study of dark sorcery, becoming Nagash's vizier and principal lieutenant. Arcan was never defeated in open combat, and it was he who led the suicidal counterattack that let Nagash escape. Arcan was finally killed by a spear that was thrown by an unknown soldier, so never write off those basic line infantry. However, before Arcan died, he cursed his bones so that anyone touched his corpse would then be cursed. Arcan was brought back to life by Nagash to become the first of the 9 Dark Lords. However, after Nagash was slain, Arcan eventually returned to Nehekhara and carved out his own kingdom. Currently, he is tolerated by the other Tomb Kings because he is a powerful ally to those that can afford his price. Arcan often fights his main rival, Settra, and this however ends in a stalemate. Settra is unable to overcome Arcan's incredible adeptness at sorcery, but Arcan's army is never large or powerful enough to overcome Settra. Arcan himself does hold the Liber Mortis, which is one of the 9 books of Nagash, and secretly and continually plots to resurrect Nagash and destroy all of the Tomb Kings. So, Arcan then, above average strength, toughness, attacks, leadership, low ballistic skill, initiative and wounds. So he has the Tomb Blade of Arcan. It's a magic weapon, and every unsaved wound that causes restores 1 wound to Arcan or his unit. The Liber Mortis makes him a level 5 wizard, and the Staff of Nagash is an arcane item that can store unused dispel dice, which can then be used as power dice in Arcan's next magic phase, which that's great. So he can be mounted on his chariot that can be given 2 extra steeds and the fly rule, but he doesn't have to be. So Arcan can be on foot. So he starts as a level 4 wizard, becoming level 5 with the Liber Mortis, and he uses the Law of Death. That means he cannot be the army's hierophant, so you would need to take a leash priest with the Law of Nehekhara. No special rules, he just has the Curse, Flamble and Nehekhara and Undead. Overall, he's an excellent caster, and he's not terrible in combat, but he can't be a Hierophant, so you are going to have to double up on casters. He's better taken on foot, and in my local meta, that meant hiding him in a unit, so he can't be attacked, but he doesn't have the My Will Be Done, so he's not buffing that unit. An archer unit's not a bad option, but then you're not getting the benefit of his combat abilities. So it is a tricky one. Again, you've got a caster who's not that bad at fighting, but not great enough to be right on the front line, but you don't want to waste some of those combat abilities. Overall, though, I do feel like he's probably the best value for points of the Legendary Lords, but overall, I would still prefer probably 2 level 4 Leash High Priests for the same points cost with some magic items instead of taking Arcan with these rules. Will we see him in the New World? Who knows? The last of the Tomb King's legendary lords, of which there are 4, is Grand Hierophant Katep, the Liege Lord of Khemri. There was never a model for him, so there is no picture, and he was the head of the Mortuary Cult's Council, and he alone knows all of its secrets and unwritten law. Oldest of all the Liege priests, he was the first member of the order to truly deny death. Following Nagash's great ritual, he tried to restore order and broke the magical seals of the Grand Pyramid and awoke Settra. So it was he that awoke Settra. Settra, however, was angry at the mortuary cult because they supposedly lied about their power, and therefore he exiled Katep from Khemri until Katep could bring back the golden age of Nehekhara. Katep now roams the land of the dead, aiding other Tomb Kings when he can, before disappearing and continuing on his way. So there's no surprise that Katep is an average caster lord with low stats except his leadership. He comes with 2 magic items, which is the Leash Staff. This is an arcane item that can re-roll all casting dice once per turn. The Scroll of the Cursing Word is an arcane item. It's 1 use only, and instead of dispelling the spell, the caster takes a toughness test, which if failed, they cannot cast further. If they roll a 6, they take D3 wounds with no saves allowed. This is of limited value. I think I'd rather have a Dispel Scroll. He's a level 4 wizard, and he does use the Law of Nehekhara. So he gets the Nehekhara Undead rule, but he is also the Grand Hierophant of Khemri and always must be the Hierophant. He is also a Law Master of the Law of Nehekhara and therefore knows all the spells. He's a great caster, but again expensive in points and doesn't offer much more than a normal High Priest, which is nearly half the points. And without a miniature, he was never seen on the tabletop in my local area. As I said, I'd rather have a normal Liege High Priest who's also a level 4 wizard with the Law of Nehekhara and choose my own magic items, such as things like Dispel Scrolls and so on. So not the best. And again, will we see him in the old world? Who's to say? There you go. I hope you've enjoyed a look at the Tomb King's legendary lords. Whether they will be in the old world, who's to say? They definitely exist at the time. The timeline that the old world is set, but I think it's still nice for completeness to see what those legendary lords were and kind of what roles they did in the old Tomb Kings book. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't know, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below. And as always, please hit the subscribe button. Totally free for you to do. Means a lot for me, so thank you for that in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Owl. There's 1 episode left. Tune back in for the legendary heroes.